The Jeremiah Show and Anaïs Reno present Lady of the Lavender Mist. Jazz vocalist Anaïs Reno is here today with me. She just released her second album. Congratulations. It's on Club 44 Records, and it is called Lady of the Lavender Mist. Um, Welcome, Anaïs. It's been a little while since I've
Yay.
seen you.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I always look forward to seeing you, and when you bring new music, even more.
Yeah.
This album is so big, it's so full, it's so you, and I just really love it. We're playing it throughout the show today, for everybody listening. So you're going to get to hear the entire album here, but you can also go and find it, and I encourage you to do this. So tell me, kind of catch me up a little bit. You had a crazy full year. What have you been up to? Narrow it down for us. Just bring it down to the highlights.
Well, thank you. First, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy talking with you, of course. And yeah, I guess it's been kind of a busy year. I just graduated a little less than 2 weeks ago
That
from
is right. I saw that online somewhere. Congratulations.
I'm an adult now. Yay.
Is that scary? How do you feel at this moment about
I
that?
feel a lot of different things about it. I think it's not quite real in practice yet because right now it might as well just be summer break in between semesters. I'm sure it'll hit me more when I'm not going back to school in August. But I have had some nice gigging opportunities. I got to travel a little bit over the last year, and it was a really busy last year of learning and working with some new people, and of course, putting this record together, which I felt very passionate about. And I'm really happy that it finally gets to be heard and I get to talk about it.
Yeah, that must be exciting when you've worked so hard on it. But
Mhm.
you've also worked so hard on getting out there and being out there. I see, I follow all of your adventures around the globe as you gig at these great iconic clubs. Um, and it almost looks like you do that almost every weekend. You're a busy, very busy person, aren't you?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I email a lot of people.
Well, you had, speaking of this past year, this past experiences, and the inspiration for the new album, Lady of the Lavender Mist. What
Mm.
an incredible title. Um, you had this train ride that was life-changing for you. Can you?
Life changing.
Well, it really was, right? It puts you here today. It puts on the eve, your album was released just a couple days ago. Would you not think that it had changed your life in some way or put you in a into a path, a new path that opened up new discovery and new things about yourself musically?
Yeah, it definitely had more of an impact than I anticipated at the time because when you're on the train, you're not thinking anything particularly significant is going to happen. But I was listening to some old Duke Ellington records and re-listening to some that I hadn't listened to in a while. And I saw this title come up, Lady of the Lavender Mist. And for anybody who knows anything about me, you included Jeremiah. That's exactly the type of title that I would like and that I would wish I had personally come up with. And I listened to it, and it was the most evocative, emotional arrangement. God, the way that he played with the dynamics and this deceptively simple melody in the A sections and the way that it twists your ear on the bridge. It's so gorgeous and it's executed perfectly, in my opinion. And I started to research some lyrics to it. I texted Will Friedwald, who we both know, asking him if there had been lyrics to it, and I couldn't find any, neither could he. So I started for several months to write some. And that wasn't something that I was necessarily doing a lot, but the song I felt needed to have something and I wanted to sing it and I wanted to figure out a way to input the image that I was seeing into the song. And so I played with this picture of this phantom like woman in a forest, maybe, who is kind of slow dancing by herself and is feeling a great deal of grief or loneliness because of having been unlucky in love. And the entire time she's waiting for somebody to come find her and relieve her from this, but nobody does. And so eventually she, I guess, figuratively or literally disappears behind that mist. And I didn't think much of it. I thought it was just a sad song. And so I started to assemble the rest of the record, knowing that somehow that song would be the centerpiece. And I was going through a bit of a transformative, somewhat rough period where I had to make some difficult decisions to end certain cycles I found myself in. And that's obviously not easy. And all of a sudden, the lyrics started to feel more like a warning against what can happen when you refuse to work yourself out of bad positions. It's very easy to fall in love with the comfort that you feel being in a situation that is ultimately not productive for you. And that started to echo through a lot of the decisions that I would soon make or try to rationalize in some way. So, in some ways, I guess, yeah, it is kind of life changing. And you
Hmm.
don't think that that's going to happen because who goes on the Amtrak thinking that something particularly significant is going to occur?
Well,
But
that's
it did.
very significant and very deep and very introspective and very wise. I mean, that's what one thing I know about you, and I've learned over the years is that you're very wise, be way beyond your years. I mean, not only artistically, but thoughtfully. You're introspective, and look at just the way you took this music inspired you to reflect on your life and make changes before it was too late, before you were the lady of the lavender mist. How much
A very
art?
dramatic way to put it, you know? I'm going to disappear behind a mist if I don't make a change. But
Well, can I mean, I want to point out and kind of underscore what you said there. Um, we do that, don't we? We disappear sometimes in relationships or or people that need things from us, and we disappear and we put their needs ahead of ours. So that's a very um, striking image
mhm.
of an emotion, a human emotion I think we all go through. Now, as an artist, as a musical artist, um, and you have relationships, right? Like everybody else, you fall in love and then things sometimes don't always, life is complicated, it's challenging. You have challenges in relationships. As an artist, how hard do you really have to recenter yourself a lot, recalibrate and say, this relationship is taking from my art, from my energy that I need to put into me as an artist. Does that ever come up front and center where you need to make a choice, and you need to make a strong choice? Otherwise, you may lose some of yourself.
I will admit, and I'm not sure that everybody would agree with me or have a similar experience with this. It's very specific to person, I imagine. I try not to make personal decisions in my life based on my singing or writing or whatever it may be. I think that if something is good for me personally, there's no reason that it shouldn't be good for me artistically. And I try specifically not to have my personal and artistic identities that far intertwined. I don't think that that's healthy for me. I think for some people that works for them, but it doesn't work for me personally. And so I try to keep those decisions separate in a way. But of course, there are times where we find that they are undeniably linked and that a happier, more productive personal life can lend itself to a more fruitful and inspired artistic life. And when I was 15, 16, when we first spoke, actually, maybe when I was 17, I don't know that I would have had that same opinion. I might have had the idea that you must reject everything else for the sake of whatever you feel your next steps artistically have to be. I have since learned that's not productive for me. So I try to keep a partition in between those lines of thinking as much as possible, unless they positively impact each other.
Mhm. How did you discover that? How did that come about?
I just don't think that I'm someone who can productively think that way. I am prone to, when thinking that way, romanticizing the struggle, the torturedness of it all, that whole trope. And I think when you start to actually face somewhat adult problems and it's not theoretical anymore, you realize, actually, I don't want to feel this way. This is not something to be romanticized. And of course, whatever I feel now is not the same thing, or maybe to the same gravity that like people in their 40s, 50s are feeling. It's still very based on perspective. But whatever I'm feeling now or I've experienced in the last few years is very different from what I was theoretically finding beautifully tortured when I was 16. And now I look back and I laugh at that a little bit because I'm a better musician now. So I
But
guess
still
that's all the
poetic,
answer I need.
but very poetic and still in tune. It's in tune with the world around you and your feelings. Just a different type of angst, maybe that you've traded
Yeah.
for the 16-year-old angst.
Yeah.
Uh, what do you know about the song "Lady of the Lavender Mist," Duke Ellington originally? What uh, did anything stand out as you were researching the song and looking for lyrics or a story?
Actually, the lyric that I chose didn't really have much to do with the original inspiration of that title and how it linked to Ellington's band, but essentially, there's this book called Duke Ellington, the Piano Prince and His Orchestra, and it refers to the, I guess you could say, ambiance, the spirit of his band as a Lady of the Lavender Mist, which, of course, when you listen to those records, there's no better way to put that. And I will say that the lyric was pretty much just based on the immediate image I saw when I first heard the song before I'd ever researched anything or asked Will Friedwald about it. And I don't know if he would approve of that. I would like to believe he would, but I mean, it's such an evocative title and it's such a gorgeous arrangement. How could you not get ideas, you
Right,
know?
it's made for interpretation
Hmm.
to the listener. And isn't that, as an artist, you could probably attest to this, isn't that the biggest compliment
Oh,
to an
yeah.
artist when someone else hears it and hears something new?
If
Um,
someone
I
said that
think he
to
would
me
approve.
about my writing, oh my God, I would be happy. I'd be done.
Have you ever walked in lavender mist? Have you ever been to like a lavender farm
I haven't.
early morning? You got to try that. I think
Yeah, I
that's
gotta, maybe I should have done some more like method work before writing the song.
I
No,
could
I
see you.
haven't.
I could just see you floating through a lavender farm and the lavender mist. Might maybe a good video.
That could be a music video, yeah.
Now, when you were on this train, because when you told the story of hearing this for the first time, that kind of unlocked in my imagination this magical train ride of just like it, everything out the window rushing by in a blur, and then musical notes, just overtook the whole carriage. And how was it for you? I mean, I know you played it over and over and
I
over.
played it over and over and over again. Yeah. And
Was it any way
such
the
a
way you
cinematic
imagine it?
recording and
Yeah.
how it automatically makes wherever you are, but particularly if you're on a scenic route on a train ride, makes it feel like you're in some sort of movie montage, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, that's how it came to me. And when I listened to it, well, I love your stories. I mean, you're so good at expressing what you see and what you hear. One of the I hate to say favorites, but right now this is my favorite, The Autumn Leaves. The way that you do this song, tell me a little bit about it and tell me the story behind it. How did it make it on the album for you, and why is it so important?
As I mentioned earlier, I started assembling the other tracks on the album before I had reckoned with the deeper message Lady of the Lavender Mist had for me. But coincidentally, and maybe not so coincidentally actually, I found after the lyric had this new meaning that a lot of the songs on the album that I had already chosen discussed a desire on the narrator's part to get out of a negative experience or embrace a joyful one, or there would be a certain slant to the lyric in which it was either more optimistic than I had initially thought or a little darker than I initially thought. And I felt that somehow a lot of the songs created, like, filled in all these different hues of that process. And Autumn Leaves was definitely one of them because if you listen to and translate the French lyric and compare it to the English lyric, French is much darker and deals a lot more in endings than the English does. And obviously, I wouldn't say that the English is a supremely happy song. It's talking about something having passed. We always talk about the autumn of one's years, of one's life, one's relationship as coming to terms with some sort of ending. However, it still feels that there's a comfort, in my opinion, of like, like the hands I used to hold, like, but
Mhm.
it feels like you're still holding them in some way, or at least in your memory, and it brings you a sense of longing, but also comfort to know that you've had that in your life. The gift of having been able to look at the autumn leaves of red and gold and still see somebody who you love in them. But the French lyric talks a lot more about, I mean, Le Feuille Morte quite literally translates to the dead leaves instead of the autumn leaves, which has a lot more finality to it. And it talks about something that is just gone. And you are only left with this ache. And I found that very interesting because I don't know that I ever thought that deeply about the English lyric before. It's a song we all know, and I don't remember even when I learned it. It's just one of those standards that one day I knew it, maybe. It's very simple, it's very sparse, but there's a lot of beautiful imagery in those somewhat unassuming lyrics because we know them so well. And to then compare it to the French lyric expanded the world of it and got me thinking about the different ways that one could feel about something that is no longer. And I felt that it would be a beautiful way to open the album, also because Peter Bernstein plays so beautifully on that verse up front that not enough people have heard, in my opinion. It's a perfectly written verse. It, in my opinion, very clever, in a very clever way, calls somewhat to the melody that we all know, but doesn't quite give it away. And I thought, what better way to introduce this? Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, that's why you chose to open the album with this
Hmm.
song? Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yay.
So tell me a little bit about when lights are low, how do you have you do you Anais, do you find that as you mature, as you grow year to year and you mature and you gather more life experiences, that you hear the music that you maybe sang or knew or loved when you were 16, 15, 14 or younger, do you find that you hear something new or that you relate to the song for the age that you're at? For instance, how do you appreciate when lights are low versus, let's say, when you were 16?
Hmm. I didn't know when lights are low when I was 16, but I do know that at the time I might have overlooked how well written it is because it has a melody that's very simple. It's uh I don't want to say stagnant because that sounds somewhat negative, but a lot of repeated notes, a lot of similar phrases, and it's exactly because of those qualities that it is so much fun to sing. And it swings so naturally, and it gives so much room to play and lean into the swing of it all. And I will say, I learned a lot specifically in the studio recording this one as a musician because it was the first track we did. Everything immediately felt good, which is obviously not always the case. And part of that's just because I had an amazing band. But, I think it, unbeknownst to me at the time, was the perfect way to start the studio session because it's very, as I said, it's very simple, but it gives you room to feel each other out. And I learned a lot about swing and like locking in to band members' quarter notes and fills and comping through that one specifically. And I just wouldn't have had the insight or the education at the time. When I was 16, 17, I might have thought that it was too simple for what a sophisticated singer I was or whatever, Not that I was thinking that way, but we have our jaded thoughts at any given
Yeah,
point, and that was mine at the time.
it's interesting that you became comfortable with the musicians and the band that you put together for the album through that song.
Hmm.
If I mentioned each band's name, each band member's name, could you um, determine one thing that you learned about them, or that you learned about yourself musically, and
Oh,
that made you?
easily.
And that
Yeah.
let's do it then. Let's go through, mention each band member. Would you like me to do it? And then
Oh, whatever.
give me, just give me an idea of what you felt, what you learned. Okay, Peter Bernstein.
Peter Bernstein, he's obviously considered to be one of the greatest guitarists alive right now, probably. And for one, in terms of the actual musicianship, the actual playing of the songs, his ability to listen and react to what's happening around him without being overbearing in his comping, in his rhythmic feel, in his interpretation is absolutely amazing because obviously the guitar is very different from the piano in some ways. You aren't It's not as easy to take up as much sonic space. You have fewer fingers. It's a very different instrument in a lot of ways, in ways that actual guitarists and piano players would have more to say than I do about. But he was able to fill up the sound without making every moment the Peter Bernstein show. And of course, to me, it is the Peter Bernstein show because I'm aware he's playing and he sounds amazing, but in the sense of what the song needed, that was his true concern. And there's always something to learn from that. But
And
also in
what did he
terms
give
of,
you? What did that give you?
it just gave me a different perspective on some of the songs. For example, Autumn Leaves, honestly, that verse at the beginning, I think I was moving it a lot slower and I had a little bit less distinction between some of the sections because even though I know what the translation of the French is, to some extent, when you are working with an instrumentalist, there can be certain notes on phrasing that you just get from the way that they're accompanying you that can move it along in a more effective way. And it's that collaboration that's very valuable. But also, in terms of professionalism and being a collaborator, Lady Lavender Mist, the track, is originally in E flat on Ellington's recording, and it's obviously a big band. And I was doing it in a tritone away, which sucks to transpose, and not with a big band. And it's not that there were any other recordings to, especially in that key, to really go off of for the vocal phrasing of it. And so he really did the homework on it. He listened to it, he transcribed the nuances of Ellington's harmony, figured out how he could put it onto the guitar, and then put it a tritone away. It was just amazing to see that even somebody of that caliber, well, I'm sure it's especially because he's somebody of that caliber, that he was so ready to create something and do the work and keep in mind what I was saying, but also put his own spin on it in a way that, again, supported the song. So there are endless lessons to be learned from that, I'd say.
How about David Wong?
The big thing with David Wong, particularly in the studio, was on When Lights Are Low, because he is playing the most solid, pure quarter note ever, especially on that second chorus where it goes from 2 to 4. How could somebody not learn about locking in with somebody's quarter note when that's how he's playing it? It gives the perfect bass line. It swings so hard. I remember when we were actually doing it, not even just in hindsight listening to it, but when we were actually playing, thinking, oh, this feels different. This feels new. This feels deeper. And ever since then, I have thought about swing and working with any band member, but particularly a bassist, differently. I learned so much, and like that's another like kind of life-changing thing. I mean, I learned so much about how to actually lock in with people and work musically, not just theoretically, but practically when you are playing from him in that moment.
And I'm watching your face as you're talking about him and these musicians, and you're so I can see you getting inspired,
It's exciting.
yeah, and excited. It's very, very cool to see
I feel
that.
very fortunate at any age, but particularly at my age, to have had these experiences because it really teaches you. It like this is gold, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't even know what you're saying, but it sounds
Oh,
like
sorry.
no. I mean, it's inspiring from a non-musician listening to you describe what you're going through. It's
All
just,
I'll say is like that's why it feels so good.
yeah, yeah.
That's really it. It's because of what he was doing there. I mean, what everybody was doing there, but
Joe Farnsworth.
I, oh yeah, Joe. I love Joe. Um, yeah, Joe is somebody who can kind of play everything, but he specifically didn't on this record. And he would, let it out here and there.
Hmm.
But it was his restraint so that everything was intense but intentional that I thought was so perfect and I was so thrilled with. And if we're going to talk about locking in so that everything feels good, I mean, he and David have this perfect lock in on the record. And on the ballads, particularly, well, I guess the ballads that he was on, because Lady Lavender Mist was just duo. So Round Midnight and Take Love Easy. Um, because those are very different ballads. One is, the latter is a little bit bluesier, it swings a little bit more. Round Midnight is pretty straight, but he knows how to create an atmosphere that you almost don't immediately notice. I mean, to me, the best thing is if I can tell that it sounds and feels good, but I can't quite pinpoint why at first, because that means that the musicians are doing something right without taking the spotlight away from the music.
Mm.
It's perfect.
Juliet Kurtzman.
Hmm.
We
My mommy.
love her.
Yeah, she plays on Take Love Easy. It's a little cameo. And so far, out of, both, I've had two studio records that she's been on both of them. And I love her violin sound. She knows this. I mean, I've told her this, she's my mom, but her violin sound brings a warmth that I really appreciate, particularly in this genre, because it's very easy, I think, to discount something like that in jazz. Typically, like if you're going for like the fiddle sound, the main goal is not to have this big warm sound. It's a little bit, what would the right word be? It's, it can be like a little bit thinner or lighter or whatever, and not, it's just a different style. But I love how her classical training meeting with the jazz work that she's done adds to a song like Take Love Easy, because there's an irony in what she's playing, but it still sounds elegant. And that's exactly what a song like that needs, in my opinion.
Hmm. Well, thanks for doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's so
I
beautiful that
blabbed a
you.
little bit, but I get excited. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, your excitement is infectious. It's in this album. It's in your work. And again, congratulations on such a great album, putting out such a great album, working with such great musicians. Um, it's really beautiful. Well, you said something that I liked. I read a quote that you've learned the value of importance of purely joyful music. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? With that?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, when you're young and jaded, it's very easy to romanticize the struggling artist, tortured musician trope. And then when you actually feel grief of any sort, you realize, oh, actually, this is not fun at all. And you oftentimes you can find catharsis in listening to sad music, but there's actually a lot of relief and joy to be found in music that is just meant to make you happy. And I really didn't understand that for a long time. I knew that there were some nice upbeat songs, but I would put them in a set list or an album, for example, more so because I knew that they had to be there. Not everybody wants to hear Lady Lavender Mist all the time.
Mhm.
But now I understand that it's actually very necessary for us as people and artists and the area in which those things meet. I have the most fun singing both darker songs and some of the happiest songs I've ever sung. This isn't from the record, so maybe it's not most productive to mention, but Duke Ellington's I'm Beginning to See the Light is a big example of that for me. I didn't like that song when I was 16, 17. I thought it was boring and I didn't really like singing it. And over time, I started to understand that it has this infectious groove about it. There is something that always lights up the bandstand in that song whenever I do it, no matter who I'm working with, no matter who's in the audience, no matter what kind of gig format it is. It has that quality, that magic touch. And now it's one of my favorites to sing. And the song is literally about not always having understood this joy, but now starting to see it and embrace it. And I mean, it's so happy that like Navy SEALs would play it on board to boost morale. It's amazing what this stuff can do, and I couldn't appreciate that at one point, but now I see how important it is.
What do you think that changes in you? What do you think? When do you think that switch? Because you've mentioned, and I got to bring, we got to do a whole show on this at one time because it's way too much to get into. But you talk about the angst that you had at 16, 17, and I think we all have that, so I
Of course,
understand it.
yeah, that's
But when
typical.
I look at you, when I what I know of you, I would never say she's got teenage angst. She's going through whatever that that the teenagers go through. You're always so put together and so well spoken, articulate. Uh, when I think of teenage angst, I think of something totally different than you. But you've gone through it. You've mentioned it a few times. You go through things. You're a person that really feels what you need to feel, and you acknowledge that and own it, which I think is so great. And speaking of a song, so I want to know about that someday. Like, why does this not match for me? Anais does not seem, you seem so,
Well, I'm not a
so
teenager
sh
anymore, so that's part of it. But
yeah. But even when I knew you then, but maybe I saw a different side. Well, there's a prime example of what you're talking about is a song on the album called Gravy Waltz, and you say that when you perform it, uh, people will get up and start dancing and is that a good example of sort of that joyful song for you, a joyful
exactly. And
interpretation?
when I was talking about the theme of Lady of Lavender Mist and how some of the songs I think perfectly encapsulated the embracing of joy, and maybe that's something that I particularly felt I needed to include and talk about through the work. Gravy Waltz is a big part of that. I mean, the way that the rhythm of the lyric perfectly swings and lines up in that triplet feel because it's a waltz makes people like shimmy on their seats and stuff. And it's so fun to sing. And again, that's one that I was singing when I was 17 and I couldn't understand. And I don't mean to be trashing my 17-year-old self throughout this whole interview. I respect her. And obviously, I just had yet to learn that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I am in the process still of learning that because it makes things more fun, not so serious, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back with Anaïs Reno, Lady of the Lavender Mist. Be right back.